was just sitting down the hall here in my room as a cadet. My roommate was studying, and I was reading this story about the march up the Italian boot and the tough time that the American military, the GIs were having as they pressed down or up the peninsula. And I came across the name Bill Crawford. At first it didn't dawn on me, and then it got into the part about the Medal of Honor. And I went back and I read it again, and the name, there was something there, but I wasn't catching it. And then finally it dawned on me. And I remember looking over at my roommate and I said, "You're not going to believe this, but I think Bill Crawford received the Medal of Honor. I think our janitor wears the Medal of Honor."
On September 13th, 1943, United States Army Private Bill Crawford was with the 36th Infantry on an assault of Hill 424 near Altavilla, Italy. At the point position, out in front and alone, the young scout encountered not just one, but 3 well-camouflaged enemy machine gun nests hidden in the hillside. With gunfire raging all around, Crawford dove for cover in a small ravine.
On his own initiative, he first attacked one of the machine gun emplacements, then turned to attack the second.
When the dust settled, Crawford had single-handedly wiped out all 3 of the enemy positions. He destroyed their guns and crew, allowing his previously pinned company to advance. The courageous effort earned Crawford the Medal of Honor.
I was astounded at the bravery. My God, the courage that he displayed, and the level-headedness and the manner in which he went about it.
You could tell by his action that he was selfless in the way that he conducted himself, but that's the way he conducted himself in his entire life.
Bill Crawford lived a simple life. He grew up on a farm near the steel town of Pueblo, Colorado, and for his entire life, Crawford was a fighter. When he was only a few months old, Crawford's mother died, and he quickly learned to fend for himself. Life on the farm with few luxuries helped hone his survival skills. It was those life lessons he would call on later as he faced down the Nazi gunners on that lonely hill in southern Italy.
My father's years growing up were pretty tough years. His mother died when he was a baby, just a few months old. And so he was pretty much raised by his father and grandparents.
He worked in his grandfather's store, grocery store, and he had that was fun for him. And he did some boxing when he was in high school, and liked to go hunting.
As he grew, Crawford developed a love of the outdoors, especially hunting and fishing. He was comfortable in the wilderness, and his ability to handle firearms made him a natural candidate for the service. In 1942, Crawford was drafted into the Army. He was just 20 years old. In 1939, World War II exploded on the scene. From 1939 till 1945, the worldwide conflict involved every major power. The two sides were known as the Allies and the Axis.
And World War II is really the turning point in history on preserving freedom. Because frankly, the Nazis, had taken over all of continental Europe practically, and if it weren't for Churchill's determination, they would have just gone across the canal, and then the United States would have been an island unto itself for democracy.
The Allies fought fierce battles in North Africa from October of 1942 till May of 1943. Crawford's 36th Infantry Division arrived in Africa in April of 1943. Originally composed of Texas National Guardsmen, the 36th Infantry Division, known as the Teapatchers, boasted a history dating back to 1836 and the Alamo. Just mobilized into the Army in 1940, they maneuvered and trained in the Carolinas, Louisiana, and Massachusetts. They were ordinary men from throughout the United States. The Teapatchers reached fighting trim in Africa.
A German lady on the radio was broadcasting to give American GIs the message, you know, to make them homesick and stuff, that their loved ones were having a good time back home and they ought to go back home to them and stuff, you know. Of course, they didn't like it at all, and he'd say, you know, our morale is low, but he says, we're not leaving until Germany falls.
On September 9, 1943, the Fifth Army, led by General Mark Clark, was to storm the Salerno beachhead at 3:30 a.m. Under the cover of darkness, Crawford and his fellow Tea-Patchers waited in small landing craft afloat on Salerno Bay. They were eager and ready for their first combat mission.
He was on the first wave of the Salerno invasion. Their assault boat came on the beaches at Salerno about 3 o'clock in the morning on September 9th, 1943.
Salerno was a fierce baptism of fire for the 36th. They charged inland, cut through minefields and barbed wire. An enemy outpost marked them with machine gun tracers. Krauts were waiting with 88s on the ridges, with tanks on the flats. The landing barely had been accomplished when the Germans launched their first armored attack. Nazi panzers barreled through and engaged the Americans in a bloody battle, matching man to tank.
They had to go across, you know, there were some mines on the beaches that exploded and some guys died. And there was Constantine wire that said that they had to, first guys had to go and lay down across the Constantine wire and put the rifle down under their chest, and then the other guys would actually use them as a platform to run across.
Crawford's 142nd Regiment was ordered to maneuver inland and move against Hill 424 near Altavilla.
Altavilla was about 15 miles inland on top of Mount Soprano. So we had to work our way up to the foot of that mountain, and we was under artillery fire. We dug several foxholes, as I remember, moving up.
The battle raged for 4 days. Altavilla was taken by the warriors of the 36th and then retaken by the Germans in a bloody counterattack. Altavilla was a key strong point, and its security was vital for the American forces to be successful. On September 13th, a furious counterattack was planned for the men of the 36th. Private Crawford was ready.
On the morning of the 13th, we attacked their main line of defense. A major from the battalion led a I Company up through the mountains, made a flank attack. All night long on the 12th, we walked and walked and walked, climbed, and he stopped us within 200 yards of the main German defense. We kept real quiet, deployed out there. He said, now you're going to attack at dawn. We fixed bayonets. We had always kept our bayonets on our rifles, and some of our artillery shelled the German line of defense, and then they sounded the attack. Shooting was going on, the whistles were blowing, and yelling and everything. They normally tried to scare the Germans as much as we could, make as much noise as we could. Platoon sergeant and I kind of was on the right flank. We saw a little rock wall. He beat me to the wall, and I laid there and I fired what I thought was a German defense there. I fired a clip. I started to reload and see what he was doing. He wasn't doing anything. He was just laying there real quiet, face down. And I crawled over there, and he had 6 or 8 holes out his back. He'd been hit just before he got to that rock wall by a machine gun.
Upset by the death of his good friend, but not shaken, Crawford knew he had to push on to rejoin his company.
joined the rest of the guys and charged on up there. And by the time I got there, all the Germans was coming out with their hands up, pleading for mercy and things. We'd made a lot of noise and shot a lot of them, I guess. We had about 15 prisoners.
After the capture of the 15 Nazis, Crawford's platoon was again pinned down by intense enemy machine gun fire. Without orders, and on his own initiative, Crawford took off into the woods to stalk the enemy snipers.
Now, I just followed a little narrow ditch. Oh, it must have been 18, maybe 24 inches wide and almost 4 feet deep. I stayed pretty close to it, and sure enough, there's a brushy terrain, a well camouflaged area right ahead. And out of that came a burst of machine gun fire. As I was running for this little ditch, he was shooting right under my feet. Probably some of the rounds probably went between my legs and never touched me.
Unknown to Crawford at the time, a total of 3 German machine gun emplacements were hidden in the immediate area. Ever the cunning scout, Crawford focused on getting to the gun that had just missed him. And like a fox, he inched his way closer and closer until the well-camouflaged nest was just a few feet away.
Had a gas mask and some stuff on me. I had to get rid of it to crawl up this ditch. And I crawled back into that brush there above these guns here. I crawled by one of them quite a ways, and here was one right 10 feet below me, opened fire on our company.
When the enemy machine gun opened up, an overwhelming amount of fire raged from the hidden nests, pinning his company down. Crawford knew he must do something quickly. The survival of his company depended on the elimination of those enemy machine guns.
So I threw a hand grenade at that farthest one.
We got about 15 or 20 yards away and just heaved his hand grenade right into their little dugout area there. Perfect placement.
Crawford's grenade was right on the mark. The blast